This week, you get to meet Bob Wheeler, author of The Money Nerve and host of the Money You Should Ask podcast, plus two things you might not think go together: CFO of the world-famous Comedy Store in California and the owner of his own CPA firm. So how do you mesh the seriousness of managing money well and owning an accounting firm with comedy? Well, Bob is also a somatic therapist and a certified core energetics and radical aliveness practitioner, which means he's not only done the deep inner work on his own money story, but that he's pursued intentional ways to help others with their holistic personal growth journey as well. As Jim Rohn said, your income seldom will exceed your own personal development. Bob, I am so thankful you're here with me today. I am so excited to chat with you.
Well, I'm excited to be here. This is great, Virginia. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I want to start just right off the bat and ask you what you think abundance means now.
For me, abundance is contentment, not having to worry, having enough, having more than enough without, oh my God. Like for me, just being able to wake up and feel like there's things I want to do, but they don't absolutely have to be done.
Right. Now, is that different than perhaps what you thought abundance meant a few years ago? Tell us about that journey, what it used to mean to you and what it is now, or kind of how you got there.
Abundance to me previously was really just about money, having more than enough, having more than a lot of other people, having lots of accomplishments, like really socialized to like be able to show how successful. If you're successful, you're abundant, right? And so it was more of a, how do I present? And how will people perceive me? And then do I feel like it's enough? And is it ever enough? And it was there was a lot more pressure and on myself and trying to perform and meet everybody's expectations, even if I created those expectations in my own mind. And when you're working from that place of like, I've got to have more and show everybody how abundant I am, it's never enough. And you can never rest on your laurels because you got to keep going. You got to keep going. And then there's got to be more. And so I think for a long time, everything was driven about how I can have everything and more than everything and more than everybody else so I can be so more comfortable and all these things. And I took a trip to Africa. And some people that have heard this, I'm sure I bored them to death, but I went to Africa and all these people who were living on $100 a year average salary at the time were very happy. And I kept looking at everybody going, what is wrong with you people? You don't have abundance. How can you be grateful? How can you be thankful? Right. And I just was forced to stop and really look and see that their definition of abundance wasn't about having things. It was about gratitude. It was about seeing the things they actually had instead of looking at the things they didn't have. And it really blew my mind. I just kept, what's going on? What is wrong with this? This is,
yeah.
And it really, I came back and just did a lot of reflecting and started to realize how, even though I'd been grateful, I wasn't really grateful. And even though I knew I had things, I wasn't really appreciating what I did have. And starting to realize that just having running water, let alone hot water, let alone a flushable toilet, like those are things a lot of people actually don't have that I took for granted. And so it really helped me to start appreciating the things that I have, actually caring for things that I have instead of, I can replace it. It doesn't matter. And so it really shifted my focus to how are my relationships? How are my life experiences? Am I just existing or am I living and showing up more authentically instead of how do I present?
Yeah. Yeah. So a few things came to mind while you're telling me about that. One, I want to ask you how long you were there. And then two, if in retrospect you look back and you're like, good Lord, I was so uptight. Those people kind of actually showed me how to relax.
Yeah. So the first time in Africa, I was there 3 weeks, which I felt like was way too long to take a vacation because you should be working and making money. That was one of the best trips. I've had so many amazing trips. And yeah, I really do credit that trip and these people for, one of the things that really stuck out in my mind, I had given everybody, my mom had all these Avon samples. So I took and gave the women earrings and makeup and moisturizer. And I would, finish something that I had and I'd toss a bottle. I'd throw it in the trash and they would say, can I have that? Like, it's trash. Or they would reuse things. And they were just grateful to have a bottle that wasn't broken, right? That they would reuse. And I started to realize, wow, we're so disposable in this country. Everything is so disposable. Material things, relationships, it's just on to the next thing. And I realized just through these interactions that, yeah, there might be something more because these people seem genuinely happy with all that's coming at them.
Yeah.
Genuinely happy.
Yeah, amazing. Where were you in your business journey at that point? Did you already have a few things accomplished? Were you in the middle of building things, or was that kind of a catalyst to things?
I think it was a catalyst. I was still working for another firm, and I would have been happy to work for the other firm for the rest of my life was the goal.
Yeah.
I didn't have any plans on, let me start my own business, anything like that.
Okay.
I just wanted to get by. And I think a couple things happened. One, my boss sort of was living vicariously through me.
Okay.
He knew I was into comedy. He was sort of, these trips you take. And I was sort of like, hey, you live your life and I'll live my life. That feels a little uncomfortable. And then the other piece was I realized he was making a lot of money off me and not compensating me. Mm-hmm. He accidentally left a computer open that was a shared computer. And I saw how much money we were generating. And I knew I was doing the bulk of the work. Yeah. And I thought, wow, he doesn't share well. And I wasn't looking to get all of it or half of it, but I knew I was being not compensated well. Mm-hmm. I look at it as 10 years of really incredible experiences because he had a small firm, but I got to do a lot of stuff that bigger firms did. So I got to learn about audits and inventory and really develop relationships. And I got to try things. And if it failed, you could blame the CPA because I was just the worker, right? And so I really got to hone my skills. And so when I did leave, and after that trip and saying, what do I want out of life? Starting my own firm, even though the first couple of years were a little bumpy, I was willing to do it because I didn't want to just stay status quo because it was comfortable.
Have you ever pictured yourself having your own show? Maybe it's time. This show is edited and produced by podcastabundance.com. And if you like what we're doing, we can do it for your business too. I'm Virginia Elder, and I've been helping entrepreneurs start podcasts to market their business since 2019. I coach you through branding, structuring your episodes, workflow, and recording your podcast. Then my team and I professionally edit your audio and video so that you don't have to. We'll even write your episode descriptions and titles so that when potential customers turn to Google, your show appears in their search results. Establish authority in your niche, expand your reach, and create a library of helpful content for potential and current clients, all with your own podcast. I'm here to hold your hand and make podcasting the exciting, up-leveling experience it should be, skirting you past the tech and software struggles too. Take the first step by booking a call with me using the link in the show notes or by visiting podcastabundance.com. Now, on to the rest of the show. It's funny to me that he was making so much money, but still living vicariously through you. Like, hey, you can go on trips too. Like, so that's always this funny dynamic. But then also, it's surprising to me how many of us have to have something big happen. Like for you, it was a big trip. For other people, maybe it's something that happens in their family or a big financial journey or something. Like you have this event, positive or negative, that makes you step back and go, hold the phone. Like, this is not what I want. What am I doing with my life and my time, my relationships? Like, I wanted more. So then were you just like, I'm going to be a business owner? Or were you like, what was the thought process there? And guide us through like the next however many years of, was all the growth strategic and calculated, or were you flailing and didn't know what you were doing? Like, how did you do this?
All of the above. Well, one of the things I think that drove me in the beginning was, and I this may resonate for some people, I wasn't enough. Like, as I am, I wasn't enough. And so I needed to be interesting. I needed to travel. I needed to have things where people could say, oh, you're interesting, because I wasn't enough. So there was this need to fill something in myself that, like, can I stop yet? Can I stop? Mm-hmm. And so that was partly a driving force. When I got into accounting accidentally in high school, somebody said, I think you'd be really good at this. And I took it and I got straight A's and I thought, oh, well, this is an easy A. So I took accounting in college just to help my grade point average. And then I thought, because I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I thought, well, if I do some accounting for a bit, I'll learn about different businesses and then I could have a business, because I don't really like working for other people and having them tell me what to do. And what happened was I got into the business of business, doing tax returns and building relationships. I actually, the first 5, 6, 7 years, I had clients and then I would think, nobody's coming back. And then I would be like, oh my God, what am I going to, oh, they all came back. Oh, plus some more. Oh, well, now next year they're not going to come back. Oh, and then those came back, plus the ones that came back, plus some more. And my business just kept growing. And it wasn't really, I didn't have a long-term plan, but I did try to make everything relational. And so a client of mine asked me if I would meet with his financial advisor. And a lot of CPAs, not all, but a lot of CPAs don't always mesh well with financial advisors because sometimes they're just selling products. They're not always looking out for the clients. There's a whole bunch of things. But I met with this guy. It turns out he was the number one financial advisor, new advisor for a particular brokerage house in the country. And because I sat down with him and listened and didn't make him look, foolish, he started referring people. And all of a sudden my client base went from 200 to 400 to 600. And within about 4 or 5 years, I had almost 1,000 clients. And I'm like, oh my, and it just grew so exponentially. But because I was willing to sit and have a meeting with somebody and actually hear what they had to say, not knowing that I was going to benefit from it.
Right. That was going to be my question was, did you know that this was a potentially budding referral relationship? Or it was just
not at all.
Another fella in finance? We're going to sit down and have a chat.
Yep. I was just helping out a client who desperately wanted me to meet with his advisor. Mm-hmm. And I was just doing it to satisfy my client's need.
Yeah.
That was it.
That's amazing. Okay. So I think the power of that is, a lot of times we fill our schedule so much that we don't have time for those meetings, or we feel like, why would what am I going to gain out of that? What's the benefit to that? Why would I go spend an hour with this person? Or, sometimes we tend to discount the potential in something unless we can see an immediate benefit. So more often, if we would just go in and be open to, let's just have a conversation, you never know what could happen.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I have a client right now who's approaching his 90s. He's not going to retire for another 5-10 years. He's like, he does very well. He wanted to have lunch with me when we first connected. And I was like, ugh, I don't have time for lunch. But what I've realized, and when I stop for the moment and breathe, most of us want connection, right? We don't want to talk to the automated phone and screaming our number 12 times and 7.
Yeah.
Right? And we want to actually talk to people. We want to be in connection. And whether it's through a meal, whether it's through a phone call, whether it's whatever that might look like, people want to be connected. And so when I stop and focus on relationships with my clients, when I stop and have a meal with a client, when I take a phone call to just chat about their cat, instead of just, what's the deduction? What are the write-offs? It makes it more personable, and we're in relationship, we're not in transaction.
So what are some ways that you feel that you've taken that even further in your business in different areas, perhaps? And tell us a little bit about, because we just keep saying about your business, but tell us what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do a few things. So I have a CPA practice. I started an accounting firm, a tax service. And about 4 years ago, I brought in a partner because it was just getting so crazy big. And we do a lot of international. We're sort of like a small, we're not quite a regional, but we do a lot of high-end stuff, international tax and a lot of other things. And that, again, was just building relationship by relationship. We only take referrals, and it's just built and built. And that was, again, because I was focused on being in connection with people and what they needed versus, you better listen to me, and this is what we're doing, and I know everything. So that was what I did first. I also, at the same time, was doing some comedy on the side, and I got involved with the Comedy Store. They were in some financial trouble. They'd owed about $100 and something thousand in payroll taxes, and the IRS was about to shut their doors. And Mitzi called me up and she said, "You have to help." And I was like, "No, I just want to be a comic." But I ended up helping, and I've been the COO, CFO of the Comedy Store for 25 plus years. And because I was helping the store and they didn't have a lot of money, it actually forced me to make sure that my CPA practice was thriving so that I could give my time and energy to the store, because my friends were comics and it's an iconic club with 3 showrooms. How could I let that, go by the wayside? And so in a way, the Comedy Store helped me actually make sure my practice was thriving, because I needed to be able to give some time and energy, and they just didn't have the money at the time. Much different scenario today. They're doing quite well.
Yeah, I was going to say, you turned that ship around.
Well, a lot of us did, but yes, I was there for some key moments, and that was cool. I think the biggest thing, because I was involved in doing some acting and some comedy, which was sort of my thing, the comedy, I met a lot of creative folks. So I started getting actors and directors, production people. All my clients were very creative types. And I realized that a lot of them weren't coming from 2 + 2 is 4. They were coming from, I don't feel good about 7, right? It wasn't logic. And so I needed to start understanding what was going on for them emotionally and what they were thinking subconsciously or unconsciously, so that I could actually reach them and actually help them.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was also looking at my own money stories, because I was so busy historically presenting that I was not walking the talk, and I had to really look at that. I could tell you what to do, but I'm the exception, so I'm going to go do this. And I wasn't following my own rules.
Yeah.
So I really had to.
We're so good at giving other people advice.
Oh, here's what you should do. I'm not going to do that, but this will be really good for you.
Yeah. So is that where you launched your podcast and started on that journey, or when did that come into play?
Well, that came in a little bit later. So I think probably about 15 years was just working, building the practice, working with the Comedy Store, doing my comedy, and that was it. And then probably about it's probably been about 10 years. A friend of mine said, hey, who was a financial advisor and a comic, let's do this podcast, Funny Money. And we did all things funny, money. What's the cheapest pet? What's in your wallet? Right? Just anything. And his goal was to become famous in a year. And second year in, we were not famous. And he's like, I'm out. And the producer, Anthony, said, you know what? You need to just do your own podcast and start talking about this money stuff, money and emotions. I'd written a book. When I was going through my own process and really listening to my clients, I just realized how many people felt alone in their financial journey. And a lot of people felt shame about past choices or lack of financial literacy. And I started doing workshops and talking to people, and people would say, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. I didn't know. And I realized, we're so not in connection in so many ways. And money is such a topic to not talk about. Mm-hmm. And I just decided I want to make it a mission to normalize conversations around money. And I wanted people to know they're not alone, because there were some times in my life that got pretty dark and I felt very alone. And if I had not had some guardian angels around me, I might not have stayed, because it just was rough. And when I realized how many people out there were feeling so alone and so ashamed, I just felt like if there's anything I can do to help people, put a little spotlight on that to see that they're not alone, give them a little bit of hope, it would be well worth the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for kind of taking us with you on that journey for a minute there. That's awesome. I'm curious what you think about, you do so much work as far as personal finances and how to help people gain that connection between emotions and money. How can we apply that to business? Because everybody listening is a business owner. We're trying to build, still, on our way to millions, right? We all hope. And so how can we pull some of the lessons that are on your website and in your book and in these things, how can we pull those into the business?
Yeah. So I think it's so important to have clarity. Doesn't mean you have all the answers. It's so important to have clarity. What is my purpose? What have I come here to teach? What have I come here to offer? What are my gifts? Mm-hmm. And for me, I have this little what, why, what? What do I want? Why do I want it? Why don't I have it? What am I willing to do to get it? And to me, it's so important to know why I want it. It doesn't matter if it's superficial. It doesn't matter if I want it because I'll look cool or whatever the reason. If we can understand that, then when we look at our choices, how to get there, it's going to be much clearer. And so for me, why do I want to have this business? What do I, how do I want to be of service? I think that a lot of times people are looking for, how do I make a quick sale? How do I separate them from their money? How do I make my pockets bigger? And for me, again, going back to that relational piece, how am I in relationship with them? And for me, how am I in integrity?
Yeah.
And if I'm not in integrity, am I okay with that? And for me, I'd rather lose a client over money than lose my integrity over money, because that's just the choices that I've made. So I think it's so important to really know what our mission is, what our purpose is in the business and in life in general, because they're not separate. I incorporate my personal life into my staff, my employees, my clients, the professionals that I work with. I don't try to keep all that stuff separate. This is me. This is how I'm going to show up, and I'm going to show up in all aspects of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so many people would rather avoid looking at their bank accounts. There's a lot of narrative around that out there. And then if that is truly how you treat your personal finances, that's going to exasperate the problem when it becomes a business finance issue. So having that clarity on the purpose and why and all of these things will help you take those deep breaths, go ahead and open that window, look at that bank account, figure out things. And then, of course, getting colleagues, professionals, business besties in your corner, I think are super important there.
Yeah. And, I'm thinking about, I had a couple clients, but one in particular where they wanted a business so they could impress their parents. It's important to know that, because if you know that that's the reason, you might make different choices. They were in a particular situation where it was actually better to close the business and pivot to a job that was going to pay them 2 or 3 times what they were making and give them all the creativity. And ultimately, they wouldn't take the job because their parents would be disappointed. Ultimately, the business failed. And so they disappointed their parents anyway, right? And had they just been really clear, they could have said, oh, I'm doing this to make mom and dad like me better. Let me do some work around that. So again, it's not a right or wrong reason. It's just important to know the reason. And then we can do the work on ourselves, because unfortunately, we have to go through the fire to get to the other side.
Absolutely. Well, and that brings up in my brain boundaries, that you're doing things for your own purposes instead of listening to outside forces. And yeah, clarity, I guess, is the root word of all of this, because at least like you said, they would know, oh, I was doing this for my family. This isn't actually what I want. Let me switch gears, rather than it not working out anyways because you were fighting an uphill battle the whole time because it's not even what you wanted. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm curious now that you have a partner in your CPA firm, you're still very involved in the comedy store. I've seen many more posts about comedic events and, it seems like you're really enjoying life at this point. And I know you still work very hard, so let's not get that confused. But what does abundance look like now in your life? Because I know we're still always working towards something. There's always a journey happening, whether it's personal, health, money, business, whichever way you want to go with it. But we've never fully arrived. So what do you feel is abundance now in your personal and daily life?
Yeah, for me, abundance, it's not about how much I have. Mm-hmm. It's about the possibilities. Like, I don't feel the stress that I used to. Having a business partner, that's super helpful. Mm-hmm. So I'm not like, oh my God, I got 8,000 things I have to do today. I can just actually, I get to wake up. I don't have to be in the office by 9 o'clock. I don't have to. And so for me, abundance is the freedom to choose. I don't always choose to take vacations. I'm working on that. But being able to just have choice. And I think so many times we don't feel like we do have choice. And for a long time, I didn't feel like I had choice. I've got to do this. And I've got to do this. And I've got amazing people in my life. My business partner wants to make my life so comfortable. She's always like, no, take more time, or let me do this. And I used to be, no, I have to work harder. It can't be enjoyable, right? There was a belief it's got to be a little pain involved. And I don't believe that anymore. Now okay. I can enjoy making money and enjoy doing what I do. And it doesn't have to always be painful or come at a cost to me emotionally.
Yeah. Well, so, and you did build your business for several years before getting to this point. Would it have been possible for you to believe that you didn't have to hustle so hard during those like building years? Or is it kind of just a after the fact realization? How do we flip that around and build and do well and grow and be focused on that growth, but also not be so crazy about it?
Yeah, I think that's where self-reflection becomes really important. And I think for a few years, I was too afraid to actually look at myself because I wasn't sure I was going to like the answers. And it wasn't until I was willing to say, you know what, I'm going to take an inventory, good, bad, ugly, and I'm going to look at all this stuff and figure this out. Whereas before, if somebody had been critical, I would have taken it internally and gone, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. Or, oh my God, I'm the worst CPA ever. Like, I would just take everything on. And so being willing to look at and say, oh, I could actually do better here. Oh, maybe I could listen a little bit better. Oh, maybe I could put some systems in place. Oh, maybe I could work on my clarity with my staff and set expectations. And once I was willing to look at all the places and be comfortable with, yeah, I'm not going to get everything right, but I'm willing to pivot. I'm willing to adjust. I think if I had done that a little bit earlier on and not been so worried that they're not going to come back and I'm not going to be enough, right? It wasn't until I worked on the piece of me being enough that I was actually able to relax.
Mm. Yeah. So it's like an inner worthiness that we have to find before we're able to really pull back from the hustle. That doesn't mean you can't work hard, but it's that, I don't know, like inner anxiety of I have to, I've got to be, sleep is for losers, got to go, like that type of.
Well, it's so crazy because even I have a lot of therapist clients and they don't feel comfortable asking for their full rate, or, well, this client owes me a bunch of money because every time we end a session, they're crying, so I don't want to ask for the check, right? And these are all internal things that we're doing. And it's until we can get comfortable with that. Like, to me, that's a big piece of it. Yes, if you're just selling coffees, maybe it's more transactional. But, in the businesses, in your business, right, it's still about relationships. There's a transaction that happens and it's relational.
Right.
I hope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you would know. So is there a resource, exercise, maybe your book? Let us know, is there a specific exercise or something that helps either just for you personally or when you talk about going through these exercises with your employees? How can we do that?
Well, of course, I do think my book is great because there's a lot of tasks, calls to action at the end of each chapter. It's really an excavation of ourselves. And so a lot of couples read my book because they can use that as a guideline to bring up a conversation that they might not otherwise bring up. Well, Bob's asking the question, so let's talk about it, right? Not me. Bob brought it up. And I think that's a great way to do it, to just start look at that. I think finding an accountability buddy, a master group, or anything where you've got other people, I think it helps to have witness, people witnessing your journey. And I think having people you can share with in a safe space so that you can have your fails, so you can have your struggles and not be held to them as a permanent judgment.
Right, right. And I know that many of the episodes of your podcast help walk us through some of these emotions of our own because we're hearing someone else's story that went through something similar or different, but it just strikes a thought process to say like, oh, is this happening in my life and I didn't realize it? And we're able to hear other people's stories. So how did you grow or maybe change how you operated something in your business based on some of what you've learned from being the host of your own podcast?
I think willing to have difficult conversations has been a big thing. A lot of people don't like them. We are so quick to get out of them. We'll text somebody rather than sit down and say, man, I need to have a conversation with you. And that means sitting down with my clients when we've made a mistake, when my staff has dropped the ball and I have to sit down and take an earful and being okay with that, right? Not reprimanding my staff person. How dare you put me in this, right? To be able to just sit there and own it. Yep, I'm responsible for this. This is my company. And I think that's a big one because a lot of, I know a lot of my staff and former staff have come back to me and said, you ruined me because you let me have a voice and you let me sit and talk and you actually heard me. And when I had a good idea, you actually pivoted and adopted it. And I think that's hard for a lot of owners and leaders to be willing to admit that they're wrong, admit that they don't know everything, and that there's a lot of great resources. My staff and my clients are great resources. So I want to take in what they have to offer because there might be a gem in there for me. And so I think that's really one of the biggest things was learning to sit down and hear information that I might have in the past said, well, I don't want to hear that. I know better. I know everything. I used to lead with my ego a lot more.
Yeah. And that ego piece is that like, I've created this, I'm the solution, I'm here to help them, right? And flipping it to be more open to what do they have to say? What do they think? What do they want? Which direction do they think we should go? And of course, there's a balance there between listening to yourself versus listening to outside forces, and those boundaries are important. We kind of touched on that earlier, but there is value in those other ideas, opinions, perspectives. I think is a big deal, especially when it comes to employees or contractors, people that are more working inside the like depths of the business, and you're up here. Maybe you can't see everything that's going on. You need some issues brought to your attention.
Absolutely. And the other question that I ask myself and I ask my staff on a regular basis, would I want to be an employee of me? And would I want to be a client of me? Because if I'm not giving the level of service that I demand, then what am I doing? And that's hard sometimes because as hard as we try, we've dropped the ball. And having to own that is not always fun, for sure. I don't love it. And I find it's incredibly powerful and a little humbling when I can just take responsibility. It makes it easier for a client to be able to forgive and move on rather than attack because I'm so defensive.
Right. Yeah. Kind of laying down those defenses and just listening. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am so curious about, it seems like you have all these pots boiling, right? You have so many roles that you have taken on that are important to you, and you seem to have found the balance on most days. How do you do that? Like, what are the like secret calendar or like productivity tips or separations that you've been able to make? How do you juggle all these things?
You know, it's interesting. I love what I do. Mm-hmm. And the question that I ask myself when I'm doing something, am I having fun? Like, am I having a good time? The minute I start to have the question or start the feeling of, I'm not enjoying this, I'm not enjoying this, and I'm 2 weeks in, I'm not enjoying this, I pivot. Because I can put all my energy into it. I wake up at 5:30 in the morning and I'm ready to go, and go walk my dogs, and I think about what the day is going to look like. And I love doing all these different things. I love being able to show up. I love being able to have some impact. And so I love what I do. If I did not love what I do, when I was driving to that CPA firm that I eventually left, I was driving to work in tears. I was crying the last 6 months. I was just driving to work crying. I hated it. And I didn't want to be there. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I didn't want that. And so for me, if I'm not having fun, not that every moment is fun and not that there aren't lots of challenges, But that is a driving force. Is this making me happy? Is this filling my soul? Is it filling my passion? Because if it's not, I don't want to put my energy there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then through that, I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe one of your values is joy. And that's why you like comedy. And that's why your question is, am I having fun? So how much do you think values, like personal or business values, equate to your perspective of what abundance is to you? Do you think they're the same thing?
They probably are. I mean, they're definitely closely related, you know?
That's what I'm
not
thinking.
sure if they're exactly the same, but I feel like there's definitely a synergy between them.
Yeah.
Because when I'm living my values and living in a way that feels in integrity, it's a lot easier to be joyful because I'm not trying to hide. I'm not trying to pretend like this is it. And, you know, I think I grew up in a family where everything was supposed to be about presentation. And so, you know, that does creep in sometimes. But overall, like, this is me. And people, oh, you shouldn't do that. People, yeah, well, this is me. Like, and some people aren't going to like it. And some people are. And I'm not here to make everybody love me. And I'm not here to save the world. I think that was a big piece for me too, was that for so long, I thought I had to bring everybody with me and I had to save everybody. Once I let go of that ridiculous notion, it just made life a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
Because not everybody's going to like me. Not everybody's going to find me funny. Not everybody's going to appreciate my perspective. Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Find your tribe.
Yeah. I think so many of us haven't had that conversation with ourselves about, like, or maybe you would say, oh, it's okay. Like, I understand not everybody will like me, but it's just a verbal statement, right? Like, you haven't truly thought about what that could mean, what that could look like, and evaluated when to or not to have your feelings hurt about something. And the statement about that I don't have to bring everybody with me, I think that's powerful because I know a little bit about your background. And I think anytime someone has maybe not been happy with the way they grew up, or maybe their parents aren't so successful, or family members have relied on them in the past, I think that's a really common thought, and not even a conscious thought, right? Probably it wasn't conscious for you for a long time.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think, and I won't say this is categorically true, but I do think a lot of people carry grief, carry trauma, and a lot of it has just not been processed. And so even the idea of not being able to bring everybody with me, there was a lot of grief there because I'm going to leave these people behind, even though there's been a lot of pain. It's my obligation. And so grief that everybody can't be on my journey, but the thing is, we're each on our own journey. People can walk alongside us as they do their journey, but our paths may separate, and that's okay. But I think for so long, I thought I had to make it okay for everybody. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that we would have to feel if we look deeply at ourselves. We're going to have to feel the grief. We're going to have to feel the pain. We're going to have to feel the disappointment. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it makes us human.
I love that. And I assume much of this is in your book. Would you share about your book, where to find it, your websites, where you want us to follow you, all the things?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So The Money Nerve, nerve, not nerd, N-E-R-V-E, themoneynerve.com. I'm a nerd, but we've got all kinds of free resources. My book is there. That was really the impetus for everything else around money and emotions, was the book, The Money Nerve, Navigating the Emotions of Money, because I kept running into people that would say, I'm the only one that got it wrong. I'm like, no, you're not. No. You're not. And so that's got the podcast and all the other stuff we do. It's got information about my tax practice and everything. So themoneynerve.com, there's an ebook. It's pretty inexpensive. You can get that on Amazon and the website and all that good stuff. But we really just engage. We really love engaging with people about their money stories. I do workshops. I'm getting ready. Now that COVID's over, I'm going to start doing live workshops again.
Yay.
That are experiential around money. And I just love having these conversations and letting people know it's okay that you don't know and you're not alone. And it only gets better.
Right. Well, and I would encourage anybody, if you haven't heard it yet, hop over to Bob's show and listen to some conversations, because so many of them will hit some kind of nerve here or there. You will see, someone that in your life that probably went through something, and just be able to identify those stories with your actual life and like your friends, your family, and yourself especially. So I just want to encourage that.
And it's really well edited, I might add. So
Thank you.
All the ums and all the bloopers disappear in the final cut.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Kudos to you and your team, because you make us look great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, one of these days I've got to go back and pull up some of those blooper reels for you. That would be fun to listen to as well.
And painful.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important because I was sharing with you earlier, like my husband says, I'm one of the least well-spoken people on this show. And he's like, you're the host, get it together, lady. So that's just a testament that, you don't have to be perfect to push yourself out there.
Oh, please don't be perfect. That is such a high bar and not really fun to be around.
Yeah.
Don't be perfect. Show up with a quiver, show up shaking, show up scared. Show up.
Absolutely.
It's important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Well, Virginia, it's always a pleasure. You're an amazing person as a person, and you're an amazing editor, and we're just grateful that you take care of us. And I love engaging.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.